The United States did not begin as a nation. It began as an argument between kings and colonists, between freedom and control, between fear and hope, on a strip of land that Europeans once considered wild and expendable. An idea was planted that would shake the world. Ordinary people could rule themselves. No crown, no emperor, no divine right, just belief. From that belief came rebellion, bloodshed, ambition, contradiction, and power. The story of the United States is not a clean march toward greatness. It is a collision of dreams and disasters, victories and betrayals, liberty and exclusion. It is the story of a nation that promised freedom before it understood what freedom truly meant. And yet, against all odds, it survived. This is the story of how a fragile experiment became a global force, how ideals were tested by reality, and how the fight to form a more perfect union is still unfinished. Before America had a name, long before ships crossed the Atlantic, the land was alive with civilizations. Native American nations thrived for thousands of years, with complex societies, trade networks, spiritual systems, and deep connections to nature. The land was not empty. It was occupied, organized, and meaningful. European arrival changed everything. In 1492, Columbus's voyage opened the door to colonization. Spain, France, and England followed, driven by gold, land, power, and God. Disease spread faster than settlers, wiping out millions of indigenous people. What followed was conquest disguised as discovery. By the early 1600s, English colonies appeared along the eastern coast. Jamestown struggled to survive. Plymouth arrived seeking religious freedom. Survival required cooperation, but power demanded control. From the start, contradiction ruled. Freedom for some, exploitation for others. Point 2. Colonies, chains, and control. The 13 colonies grew, but they were not united. Each had its own economy, culture, and identity. The North leaned toward trade and industry. The South built plantations powered by enslaved Africans. Slavery became the economic backbone of colonial prosperity. At the same time, colonists began to see themselves as different from Britain. They worked the land, built towns, and paid taxes. Yet they had no voice in Parliament. When Britain tightened control after costly wars, anger spread. Taxes without representation. Soldiers in homes. Trade restrictions. What began as frustration turned into resistance. Pamphlets, protests, and secret meetings ignited an idea more dangerous than weapons: self-rule. 3. Revolution and the birth of a nation. In 1775, shots were fired at Lexington and Concord. Farmers faced the greatest empire on earth. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence declared that all men were created equal. A radical statement written by slave owners, directed at a king, and destined to challenge the world. The Revolutionary War was brutal and uncertain. Supplies were scarce. Defeat was common. Victory was never guaranteed. But belief held. With help from France and resilience born from desperation, the colonies won. In 1783, Britain recognized American independence. The experiment had begun. 4. A fragile constitution. Freedom won the war, but peace revealed chaos. The new nation was weak, divided, and drowning in debt. The Articles of Confederation failed. States argued. The economy staggered. In 1787, leaders gathered to rewrite the system. The Constitution was born through compromise. Big states versus small states. Federal power versus state power. Freedom versus fear. Slavery was not solved. It was postponed. The Bill of Rights was added to protect individual liberties, but many were excluded. Women, Native Americans, enslaved people. America claimed liberty, but practiced limitation. 5. Expansion and erasure. The 19th century was defined by growth. America expanded westward under the belief of manifest destiny. Land was taken. Treaties were broken. Indigenous nations were forced from their homes through violence and deception. The Trail of Tears marked a national shame. At the same time, America grew stronger. New states formed. Industry expanded. Immigration surged. The nation became richer, louder, and more divided. Slavery expanded with the land. The question could no longer be avoided. Could a nation built on freedom survive slavery? 6. Civil War. America versus itself. In 1861, the nation fractured. Southern states seceded to preserve slavery. The Civil War erupted, the deadliest conflict in American history. Brother fought brother. Cities burned. Families shattered. Abraham Lincoln reframed the war as a fight for the nation's soul. The Emancipation Proclamation turned slaves into symbols of freedom and war strategy. In 1865, the Union won. Slavery was abolished. But freedom did not equal equality. 7. Reconstruction and retreat. Reconstruction promised a new America. Black Americans voted, held office, and built communities. Then came backlash. Jim Crow laws, segregation, voter suppression, and violence crushed progress. The South rebuilt white supremacy under new names. The nation moved forward economically while millions were pushed back socially. The promise of equality was delayed again. 8. Industrial power and global entry. By the late 1800s, America transformed into an industrial giant. Railroads, factories, and cities exploded. Wealth concentrated. Workers suffered. Labor movements rose. Trusts formed. Capitalism flourished and fractured society. In 1917, the U.S. entered World War I, stepping onto the global stage. After victory, America retreated into isolation. That retreat ended with disaster. 9. Depression, war, and superpower status. The Great Depression shattered confidence. Millions lost jobs and homes. Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal expanded government power to stabilize the nation. Hope returned slowly. Then came World War II. After Pearl Harbor, America mobilized fully. Factories roared. Women entered the workforce. The nation emerged victorious, but at a cost. The atomic bomb ended the war and began a new era. America was no longer just a nation. It was a superpower. Climax. 10. Cold War, rights, and reckoning. The post-war world was tense. Democracy faced communism. The Cold War defined global politics. At home, contradictions boiled over. Black Americans demanded the rights promised centuries earlier. The civil rights movement shook the nation. Leaders marched, protested, and died. Laws changed. Hearts changed slower. Vietnam fractured trust. Assassinations shattered hope. Protests filled streets. America questioned itself openly. Yet progress continued. Women's rights expanded. Immigration laws changed. Technology transformed life. 11. The modern era, power and uncertainty. The late 20th and early 21st centuries brought triumph and turmoil. The Cold War ended. The internet reshaped society. Then came 9/11. Fear returned. Wars followed. Security expanded. Freedom was debated again. Political polarization deepened. Social movements rose. Inequality widened. Democracy itself was questioned. America stood powerful but divided. 12. An unfinished story. The United States was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to evolve. Its greatest strength has always been its ability to confront itself, to argue, to protest, to change. Every generation inherits the same responsibility, to decide whether the promises written centuries ago still matter. The American story is not over. It is still being written by those who believe the experiment is worth continuing, and by those brave enough to demand that freedom finally belong to all. Not because America is flawless, but because the idea still matters.